You're listening to Viewpoints, the podcast on iTunes, smart radio covering top stories of the week, plus fun radio to get you talking. You'll find it all right here. Now, let's get back to the show. Smart fun radio to get you thinking and get you talking. He's one of the most controversial figures of our times. Julian Assange, the founder of the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks, a site that has been instrumental in revealing classified U.S. military secrets, damaging political emails, all sorts of embarrassing tidbits of information that have had real and serious world implications. Assange finally arrested after hiding out inside of a small embassy in London for 7 years. Think about that. The embassy belonging to Ecuador, of all random places. Finally, the Ecuadorians had had enough of Assange. He is known to be temperamental and difficult, and Ecuador was under pressure to lift his diplomatic protection. He's wanted by the British, the Americans, maybe even the Swedish as well. A judge has called Julian Assange, who is originally from Australia, a narcissist. Basically, you either love this guy or you hate him. He is extremely polarizing, either a champion of free speech, a defender of the public's right to know, or he is deeply arrogant, self-important, a pain in the butt, who's broken many laws and deserves to face justice. By the way, he might end up extradited to the U.S. to face the music. My guest on the line in Montreal to give us his take on this, a man who's thought a lot about the Assange case, Warren Wilansky. He's the president and founder of Plank. It's a digital design agency based in Montreal. He's a digital culture junkie. Warren, good to have you with us.
Hi, Todd. Thank you.
Julian Assange, activist or terrorist? What do you think?
Oh, that's a tough one because this is such a complex issue, and he's definitely a complex man in himself. I mean, I've been following digital culture and specifically WikiLeaks for years, and my first interaction with the organization, or when I first saw what they were doing, the mission seemed correct at the time. In other words, they're trying to just whistleblow on governments or organizations that are doing things that are against the public good. And on one level, that seemed like a good mission. But as you dig deeper and deeper into who Julian is and see where his life has led and where he is, you have to start to wonder what's really going on there and what are his motives, and then what are the motives around the governments that are looking to extradite him and try him for numerous different things.
You raised such a great point. I would agree with you 100%. My viewpoints as well about Assange. I mean, I'm a journalist, have been for 25 years, began to evolve over the years. What was really going on? Was this about the truth? Was this about the public's right to know? Or was this, Warren, about Julian Assange and just sort of self-aggrandizing and a guy who really wanted to be in the spotlight and was willing to do whatever it took to stay in that spotlight? As with all people, I guess, the answer is probably a little bit of A and a little bit of B.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, I think you've seen what I've seen, which is the evolution. I mean, we're looking at it from a distance, so we're always getting a perspective which is tainted by whoever's opinion you're getting it from. But it does seem like WikiLeaks stopped being an organization which was about doing the right thing and started to becoming a mouthpiece for him and his ego and his personality.
The other thing I think that people might find difficult to separate in all of this is the role that WikiLeaks is seen to have played in torpedoing or undermining Hillary Clinton's campaign for the White House, and where the politics start to get involved. And we know that Julian Assange personally was not a fan of Hillary Clinton. I don't know that he was or was not a fan of Donald Trump, but he certainly, we know, was not a fan of Hillary Clinton. And so I think sometimes people will conflate those two and it all gets mixed up. Well, what were they actually trying to do? Were they trying to help Donald Trump become president? Were they trying to help the Russians? I mean, are they in the pocket of Vladimir Putin? What's happening? And it is very murky, isn't it? We just don't have a lot of answers to some of those questions, and we might never have the answers.
Yeah, I mean, the answers again come through falling through a tainted filter. I mean, you saw Donald Trump crowing about Julian Assange and wanting to support him when he was, actively acting on exposing Hillary Clinton's emails and getting all that out in the public. But then as soon as something turns against him, then he suddenly becomes an enemy of the state, which is the problem here, this is politicizing what should be a legal issue, especially when we're dealing with, the rape conviction, the rape threats that are against him. And, everybody seems to have a vested interest in trying to get him or protect him but it's all political and not really legal at this point.
Yeah, you mentioned those sexual assault allegations by the Swedes, and so we know that the British want him for skipping out on his bail. The Americans want him on hacking charges and more. The Swedes may come after him again. That original charge, those sexual assault charges. We're talking to Warren Wilansky on the line in Montreal. He's the president and founder of Plank. They are a digital design agency based in Montreal, but he's really immersed in digital culture. He's been following the WikiLeaks story for a long, long time, and now we really are at a crossroads. What is going to happen to Julian Assange, who's a very controversial figure? People either love him or they hate him. And some would say, Warren, that he's his own worst enemy, that he's got a big mouth, that sometimes he says and does things that don't make him the most sympathetic figure for people who are trying to say, look, you call yourself a journalist. You're not really a journalist. You're more of an activist, number one. We understand the idea of trying to hold the establishment and powers that be, hold them to account. A lot of people would agree with that, but sometimes the methods in which you do it or the way in which you put yourself into the story is a bit of a turnoff. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. I mean, he in some ways got lucky that the Ecuadorians were willing to take him in, and it sounds to me like he's done everything in his power to upset them and frustrate them. I realize the Ecuadorian government just recently changed and is more right-leaning, so that could be part of the reasoning behind them, kind of having other powers kind of pressure them into releasing him or denying his denying his protection. But at the same time, yeah, he's definitely a difficult character to wrap your head around, and he doesn't feel like he has journalistic instincts or in mind a lot of the time.
That's a weird part of it, too, the fact that this guy was stuck in an embassy, Warren, and not a big one either. I mean, the Ecuadorian embassy in London is not large, and there he was living there inside, unable to leave for 7 years. He had a cat, and I find it really fascinating that, you're talking about a guy that revealed deeply classified secrets about the Iraq War and was very embarrassing to the American government, and yet here he was living in this embassy with a cat, apparently wasn't cleaning up after the cat, wasn't washing the dishes, wasn't cleaning the bathroom, and the Ecuadorians were getting upset about that. And then you've got this huge international story. It's just remarkable, sort of the human element to it all as well.
Yeah, I mean, it just gets stranger and stranger every single day that it goes on. I mean, when you start hearing those kind of stories, and you almost realize he probably was almost a prisoner, and probably just in his own mind has gotten further and further away from the reality of the world around him.
The other thing as well is that as this story plays out, and just to bring our listeners up to speed, we're waiting for this whole extradition process, and the British have given American authorities a number of weeks, I believe it's into June, to sort of come up with their extradition case, and we don't know how that's going to play out, although the British do have an extradition treaty with the Americans, so that certainly is going to be a factor in all of this. But that Julian Assange, perhaps, Warren, becomes almost a martyr to his cause, that those who believe that he is a champion of free speech and a champion of the public's right to know will see this as just another example of him being persecuted and attacked by the very system that he tried to call out.
I could see that completely. I mean, the extradition is going to be political. The question is how the American government, if the British do release him to the Americans, and he does stand trial, the question is if he gets a fair trial or not. If he does not get a fair trial, then absolutely his supporters and people that rally around his causes are going to be up in arms about it. But if the trial is fair, I mean, people will still be upset, but I think that you have to go through a process and make sure the process is fair. The judgments are fair, and if that's what happens, then I think if he gets a fair trial, then best of luck to everybody involved.
Last thing, there are people listening to us right now, Warren, who are going to say, hold on a second, this guy's not a hero. I mean, he published classified military secrets. He broke the law, and he deserves to be put in jail for what he did. Those are crimes. Let's not sort of whitewash it here. This guy committed some very serious crimes. What about that viewpoint?
Well, I mean, again, I think some of it depends on how you view his credentials as a journalist or accept that he's a journalist, because I think there are some limits. There are some limitations as a journalist that you can go beyond those for the better good. But then you take somebody like Chelsea Manning, who was the one who actually was the source, who was the person who actually broke the law initially. And where is Chelsea now? Free.
That's a good point. Warren Wilansky, my guest on the line in Montreal, with his take on Julian Assange, activist or terrorist or somewhere in between the two.